I never thought much about her smile before. It was the kind of smile that appeared in passing, like when someone offers you an umbrella and insists they don't need it, or when you catch a person talking to themselves in the grocery aisle and they laugh it off. Harmless, casual, something you could ignore if you wanted to. But then, one afternoon, it wasn't. I was in the back of my uncle's repair shop, trying to coax an old coffee machine back to life. The thing hissed like it had a personal grudge against me. The air smelled like burnt oil, stale espresso, and summer dust. That's when she walked in, my cousin's wife, Elena. She carried herself differently from the rest of us who worked there, as if she knew her presence tilted the balance of the room. Her hair was tied back loose, strands falling in that careless way that looked intentional. She didn't hover, didn't fuss. She just leaned against the counter, arms folded, waiting. "You're still wrestling with that?" she asked, chin tilting toward the machine. I wiped my hands on a rag, avoiding her eyes for longer than necessary. "It's winning." Her laugh wasn't loud. It slipped out like it surprised her, then lingered in the air a beat too long. I shouldn't have noticed that, but I did. We weren't close, not really. She was my cousin's wife, older by nearly 20 years, always just slightly out of reach in every way. Family gatherings put us in the same space, but we never had to talk for more than a polite minute or two. She had a calmness I didn't know what to do with. Now she was here, watching me fumble with a broken machine. "You've got the filter in backward," she said after a pause, her voice softer, almost cautious. I frowned, turning the part over in my hands. She was right. Guess I'm better at breaking things than fixing them. I meant it as a joke, but it landed heavier than I expected. Something shifted in her face. Not pity, not exactly, but recognition. Like she'd heard something I hadn't meant to say out loud. She didn't push, though. She just reached across the counter and took the filter from me, brushing my wrist by accident. Or maybe not. It was the lightest touch, but it felt like the static that comes before a storm. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The shop was too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you suddenly aware of your breathing, your hands, the way you're standing. "Try it now," she finally said, sliding the fixed filter back toward me. I did, and the machine sputtered to life, coughing out a line of steam that filled the room. Victory. I should have grinned, thanked her, made some easy remark. Instead, I just stared at her, stupidly, like the words had lodged in my throat. And then, there it was. That smile. It wasn't harmless this time. It carried something unspoken, something I didn't have the language for yet. Not flirtation exactly, not kindness either. It was knowing, as if she'd seen through me in those few minutes, seen the parts one kept tucked away. I broke eye contact first, pretending to study the machine like it was suddenly fascinating. But my hands shook a little when I reached for the cup. She didn't stay long, just pushed off the counter, smoothed her sleeve, and said she had errands. The door chimed when she left, and then I was alone again, the machine humming like it had secrets of its own. I stood there longer than I should have, replaying the way her smile had landed, how it had shifted the air between us without warning. Harmless, I told myself. Just a smile. But even then, I knew I wouldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't the last time she came into the shop. A week later, I was in the garage bay, sorting through a pile of parts my cousin left scattered on the workbench. Heat pressed down heavy, the kind that made everything smell like rubber and metal. That's when I heard her voice behind me. "Elias said you'd know where the receipts are. He's hopeless with paper." I turned, and there she was again, Elena. She didn't look as composed as usual. Her hair was damp, like she'd rushed through the rain. A faint crease marked her forehead, the kind that doesn't come from one bad day, but from years of carrying too much. I pointed toward the stacked boxes in the corner. "They should be in there. Organized, kind of." She sighed, half amused, half exhausted. Kind of is better than nothing. We sorted together, the silence thick at first, filled only with the shuffle of paper and the occasional metallic clink when I moved something too fast. She kept her sleeves rolled to the elbows, and I noticed the small veins on the back of her hands, the faint tremor when she pulled out a stack too heavy. Hands that looked steady but carried more than they admitted. "Do you ever feel like everything is waiting for you to screw it up?" I asked suddenly. It wasn't what I meant to say, but the words slipped out while I searched through receipts. Her hand stilled, a paper half pulled from the box. She didn't look at me right away, more often than I'd like. It was such a simple answer, but her voice cracked just slightly at the end, enough to make me glance up. She masked it quickly, clearing her throat, busying herself with aligning the papers. The thing about Elena was that she carried herself like a fortress, but every now and then, a window opened, just for a second, and you could glimpse something fragile behind the walls. "Here," she said, holding out a folder, her fingers brushing mine when I took it. She didn't pull away immediately, though. For a beat, her hand lingered against mine, then withdrew as if she'd realized too late. We found the receipts eventually, but by then the papers were just an excuse. I couldn't stop noticing the curve of her tired smile, the way she laughed too softly at nothing, like laughter cost her something. When she left, she didn't say goodbye in the usual, polite way. She hesitated at the door, looking back once, almost as if she wanted to add something but thought better of it. The moment hung there, unfinished, like a sentence left midair. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it. But the truth was simpler and heavier. Her hesitation stayed with me, long after the door shut, like a hand still pressed against mine. It was closing time when the storm broke. Rain hammered the tin roof of the shop, drowning out the hum of the vending machine in the corner. My cousin had already left for the night, muttering something about dinner plans, leaving me to lock up. I didn't expect Elena to still be there, but she was, sitting at the desk with a half-finished ledger, her glasses slipping low on her nose. The pale light above her made the shadows under her eyes more pronounced, and for a moment, she looked less like the confident woman I'd grown used to and more like someone just tired. "You don't have to stay," I said, trying to sound casual. She glanced up. "If I take this home, it won't get done." Then she smiled faintly, as if embarrassed by the honesty of that admission. I busied myself with wiping down the counters, pretending I wasn't paying attention. But every movement she made seemed amplified. The scratch of her pen, the faint sigh when she leaned back, the way she rubbed her temples with one hand. At one point, lightning flickered, and the power blinked off for half a second. In that silence, her voice came soft. "You ever feel like you're carrying two different lives? The one everyone thinks you have, and the one you actually live?" I froze, cloth in hand. The rain filled the gap before I answered. "Yeah, all the time." Her eyes found mine in that dim light, and something unspoken passed between us. Recognition, maybe, or the relief of not having to explain. It was the closest we had ever been, without moving an inch. I wanted to ask more, to let her speak the rest of whatever was sitting heavy on her chest. But her phone buzzed sharply on the desk, shattering the fragile pause. She picked it up quickly, almost guiltily, and I caught the name flashing across the screen. Elias. My cousin. She didn't answer, just pressed the phone to silent and slid it face down. Her hand lingered on it a second too long, then dropped back into her lap. The air felt different after that, thicker, more dangerous. She cleared her throat, pretending to focus on the ledger again, but her fingers fidgeted with the edge of the paper. I told myself to keep moving, to finish wiping down, to look anywhere but at her. But instead, I found myself leaning against the desk, too close. Close enough to notice the faint scent of her perfume, subtle and warm against the smell of rain. Her pen rolled across the desk and onto the floor. We both reached for it at the same time, hands colliding halfway down. Skin against skin. Neither of us pulled back right away. The storm outside cracked, light flooding through the window. And in that suspended second, everything in me wanted to close the distance, to cross a line I couldn't uncross. But I didn't. She snatched the pen quickly, almost too quickly, and murmured, "Thanks." I stepped back, pretending it was nothing, my chest pounding in a way I couldn't explain. The rain kept falling, steady and relentless, like it knew something I didn't dare say out loud. It happened 2 nights later. The storm had passed, but the air still felt heavy, like the world hadn't quite dried out yet. I'd stopped by the shop late to drop off some parts. The lights were low, only the small lamp at the desk casting its glow across the room. Elena was there again, alone. She didn't look surprised to see me, though. just tired. Her hair was pulled into a knot that had half fallen apart, and the dark circles beneath her eyes made her seem both older and strangely softer. "You work too much," I said quietly. "You think so?" Her tone wasn't defensive. It was curious, as if the idea had never occurred to her. I shrugged, stepping closer. "Or maybe you just stay too long." The silence stretched after that. She didn't argue, didn't smile, didn't move. Just watched me with that unreadable expression, her fingers worrying the corner of a notebook. Finally, she spoke, almost a whisper. "What are we doing?" The words froze me. Not because I hadn't thought them myself. I had, over and over, but because hearing them from her made everything real. I swallowed. "I don't know." Her gaze dropped to the floor, then back to me. "This isn't normal." "No," I said. My voice cracked in a way I hated. "It's not." We stood there, inches apart, but it felt like miles. Every sound was louder. The buzz of the lamp, the faint tick of the clock, the shallow rhythm of our breathing. She pressed her palms against the desk, grounding herself. "I shouldn't be here this late." "You shouldn't, either." "I know." Her laugh was short, almost bitter. "You're too young to get tangled in someone else's mistakes." "I don't feel young," I said. It came out harsher than I meant. She lifted her eyes then, and for a long moment, we just stared at each other. No smile, no mask, just two people caught in a place neither of us had chosen but couldn't seem to leave. I wanted to reach for her, not to touch but to keep her from slipping away. My hands stayed at my sides. "You should go," she whispered finally. I nodded, but I didn't move. Not yet. The room was so quiet that my heartbeat felt like it belonged to both of us. Then, almost too softly to hear, she said, "I don't remember the last time someone really looked at me." The words cracked open something in me I didn't have the language for. And before I could answer, she turned away, leaving me with the echo of her confession. Days passed without her coming by the shop. I told myself it was nothing, that she was busy, that the silence meant nothing. Still, I caught myself checking the door every time it chimed, listening for her voice that never came. When she finally did appear, it wasn't in the shop. It was in the small cafe across from the bus station. I'd gone in for a quick coffee, head buzzing from too little sleep. And there she was, sitting alone in the corner booth, a paper cup untouched in front of her. For a second, I thought about leaving, pretending I hadn't seen her. But she looked up, caught my hesitation, and gave the faintest nod. Not an invitation, exactly, more like permission. I slid into the seat across from her. "You avoiding me?" I asked, trying to make it sound like a joke. Her lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. Maybe avoiding myself. She looked tired in a different way this time, not just from long days, but from something that seemed carved deeper. Her fingers toyed with the cardboard sleeve of the cup, peeling it back and smoothing it down again, over and over. "Without looking at me," she said, "you remind me of someone." The words landed heavier than I expected. "Who?" Her pause was long, almost painful. "My brother. He was younger than me. Restless. Always asking questions. Always looking at the world like it had something more to offer him." I stayed quiet, not trusting my voice. "He died when he was 22, she continued, her tone steady but stripped bare. "Accident. Car. I was supposed to pick him up that night, but I was late. 5 minutes late. And I've been carrying that ever since." Her eyes flicked up to mine, searching for something. Judgment, maybe, or release. I didn't know what to say. I just watched her hands, trembling as they twisted the cardboard sleeve until it tore in two. "You're not him," she said finally, almost as if reminding herself. "But sometimes, when you look at me, I forget." My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. There was no right answer, no way to ease the weight she'd just laid between us. So I didn't try to fill the silence. I let it stand. The rain outside blurred the cafe windows, muffling the city's noise. We sat across from each other in that cocoon of quiet, and for once, I wasn't thinking about what I wanted from her. I was just thinking about what she'd lost, and what it cost her to tell me. When she finally spoke again, it was so soft I almost missed it. "Maybe that's why I can't look at you too long." And in that moment, everything shifted, not louder, not dramatic, but seismic all the same. After that day in the cafe, nothing felt the same. We didn't talk for almost a week, but the silence wasn't empty. It carried a weight, like words left unsaid were still echoing between us. When she finally walked back into the shop one evening, I felt it before I saw her. The air shifted, and I knew. She didn't come with papers this time, or errands, or excuses. Just her. "I shouldn't stay," she said softly, standing near the door. "Then why are you here?" I asked. Her eyes lingered on me, weary but unflinching. "Because I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel this." The world seemed to still at that moment. The fluorescent buzz overhead, the ticking clock, even my own breath. I wanted to answer, to match her honesty, but the words tangled in my throat. So I stepped closer instead. Slowly, cautiously, like I was approaching something fragile. She didn't move away. We stood in the middle of the cluttered shop, surrounded by tools and oil stains, yet it felt like the most private place on earth. Her hand brushed against mine, not deliberate, not an accident either. Just there, warm and steady. "I'm not asking for promises," she whispered. "I don't have any to give." "I'm not asking for anything," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd ever spoken. She exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and surrender. Then, for the first time, she leaned toward me, not in some grand, sweeping gesture, but gently, her forehead resting against mine. We stayed like that, no words, no movement, just breathing the same air. It wasn't about what came next, or what it meant, or what would happen if anyone found out. It was about this, finally allowing the truth to exist between us without running from it. The world outside kept turning, cars passing, rain dripping from the gutters. But inside, time held still. Her fingers curled loosely around mine, not clutching, not claiming, just being. And that was enough. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were damp but steady. "We can't go back to before." "No," I said. "We can't." And that was the end of it. Not the start of some fairy tale, not a confession to be tied up neatly, but an acknowledgement of what had already happened. We had crossed into something neither of us could undo. The quiet between us was full, heavy, undeniable. And in that silence, I knew we were already too far gone. I think about that night more often than I should. Not because of what we did, but because of what we didn't. There was no kiss, no whispered vows, no reckless leap into something we couldn't contain. What there was, what still lingers, was silence. A silence that spoke more clearly than words ever could. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't about love in the way stories usually tell it. It wasn't about youth meeting age, or crossing lines, or even about right and wrong. It was about recognition. Two people standing in the same quiet space, finally seen for who they were beneath all the armor. Elena taught me that sometimes the strongest connections don't arrive with fireworks. They arrive with hesitation, with pauses too long to be comfortable, with hands that brush instead of hold, with glances that ask questions neither person dares to answer. I was 20-something then, restless and impatient. I thought life was about chasing what you wanted until you had it. She showed me that sometimes restraint is the greater act of courage. That longing can exist without being resolved, and still change you forever. We never became anything more than what we were in those moments. And yet, I carry her with me. In the way I notice when someone laughs to hide their exhaustion. In the way I pause before answering, giving space instead of rushing to fill it. In the way I know that regret can soften if someone, even briefly, sees the person you've been hiding. Did she feel the same? I'll never fully know. But I do know this. She gave me something lasting, something that outlived the walls of that shop and the weight of family ties. She gave me the memory of being known. And maybe that's what love really is. Not ownership, not promises, but a moment when another soul recognizes yours and quietly says, "I see you." I'm older now, but whenever I catch myself chasing noise, I remember her silence, and how it spoke louder than anything else in my life. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?